Hi everyone. I'm just going to quickly go over a nice set of tests that we've done with Facebook at the campus in California. This is last year sometime. They got interested in the FibrePoynt concept and invited Edward Walker and myself over to come do some tests. Reason for that is Facebook connectivity. I've got a product they make freely available to a number of vendors. That they call Telegraph. This is a mesh networking type of concept, typically implemented at 60 gigs. And the normal concept that they use it for is they would go from some points and then link up various houses, buildings in a mesh network, self-healing, very nice type of technology. Fairly expensive if you want to do it for end users though, or that's what we realized, and we suggested to them, let's use the FibrePoynt to do the last 100-200 meters to the different premises, and then use overlay the Telegraph network to link up the FibrePoynt access points, which we call the JCAPs. In other words, Janus consumer access points. Janus because they point in two directions. So we've done a large number of tests. I'm just flashing through these and I'll show you in more detail. Just to go over the whole FibrePoynt principle, I think it is hell of important every time. This is the reason why we could get it patented. Normally, if you look at covering houses coming from this, this is your JCAP, consumer access point, you would think that you need a big sector antenna because you need to cover from that house to that house. But of course, the street has got this wonderful property. The furthest house, if you look down the street, is sitting sort of right in the middle of angle-wise, very close to the direction the street is running at. And as you need to go to wider angles, like this house here, you've got a house very close to you. So houses come closer to you. If you take your arms out, point down the street, and you move your arms wider in terms of angle, you'll see houses very rapidly come closer to you. Quite a useful property, and that's what we're using. So we said instead of sectors, we don't need to do that. We can go to the closest house. Clearly that guy is far out of our main beam. Okay, that's most probably sitting at about 45 degrees away from the main beam. We use a very high gain main beam, about 20 degrees wide. So that guy's way out of the main beam, but of course it's way closer than the furthest house. In fact, about 10 times closer, which gives you 20 dBs less space loss. So even though that guy's covered with 0 dBi, you get a signal to noise of 53 dBi, which is way over the max that you need for the best or the highest speed that you would get out of a 5 gig Wi-Fi link. So similarly, as you get to the second house, that's perhaps at a slightly better angle, say about 30 degrees. So that JCAP gain in that direction would be about 6 dBi. Still way below the 20, so it's way out of the main beam. But signal to noise, roughly the same. Third house there, that guy much further away, but of course the gain is increasing because we're moving towards the main beam peak, which is at about 0 degrees, but it's got a bit of a beam width even though it's narrow. And once again, same. So furthest house, that guy gets the full 20 dB. Remember, they've each got a consumer unit that points back to this JCAP, also with 20 dBs. So real beauty, which I tell to everyone, is that guy there, it's 20 dBs pointing to 20 dBs. That's 40 dBs or 10,000 square rooted. It's a factor of 100. So that effectively brings this house 2 meters away from square root. If you take 200 and you bring it 100 times closer, it's 2 meters. And every other house similarly is brought to virtually like if you've got a normal Omni router and you put a PC or laptop down in front of it, it's like all of these houses are about 2 meters away from a 5 gig router. And that's why I say to people that worry about interference, there can be no interference between you and a 5 gig router standing 2 meters away from you. I think we all know that people can walk around with their phones and it would not matter if you're that close. So there we went, and with the help of quite a large number, not large number, quite a nice and very competent team from Facebook, we set up a virtual street. You can see that's on one campus, starting at a parking lot here, positioned the JCAP here. You can see the first home is about 15 meters away. This street is not quite just a street. You must remember it's the middle of a street down to where the house edge would be roughly. So it's about 5 meters either way. So we position the various homes at different distances away to simulate a street. There you can see the J-cap, much smaller the unit than we have before. Still like Janus, pointing in two directions, but this is about 40 centimeters, that's about 25. The home units we put on little stands that they've got roughly 4 meters, we would expect the eave of a house to be, and they're standing, as I'd explained, sort of on the side of our virtual road. Now here's the real proof of the pudding. I mean, I only looked at the detail of this when I was back in South Africa, so people believe I actually shifted them very carefully to get this. But can you believe it, eh? From the closest J-cap, consumer unit to the furthest one, we really got that thing that we thought that we would get, or bargained on, the same signal to noise. There you're 200 meters away, there you're 15 meters away, and virtually all of them sitting with a very, very similar type of signal to noise. Virtually the only system I know in the world that can provide wireless into a whole massive neighborhood with every user getting the same signal to noise. Your radial systems, obviously it falls off, and the moment you don't get optimal signal to one user, the whole system suffers, or the whole bandwidth suffers. You can see also the theoretically indicated megabits per second, very high figures, not that high when you measure them to the very strict standards, but really all we're hoping for. Here you can see that the modulation scheme chosen was always for all of the houses the highest possible one, which is 256 QAM using the 11 AC standard. And you can see that because we use cross-polarized antennas, we also get both of the MIMO streams that you would expect. Okay, so those are the real type of details about it. And here we're measuring according to a standard called RFC 2544. Now the reason why I want to mention the standard is this tests the throughput you get with zero frame loss. Okay, so if you look at the closest house, we're not actually that high, 44. But remember that you can have frame loss. That doesn't mean you've got data loss, okay, because the thing just retransmits. So you can see what happens. It sort of climbs up. It actually goes quite a bit higher than this one where it's got zero frame loss. And at some point the frame loss gets too high and of course it drops away. But you can see that we could have gone up to 104. And this is a dual test, full duplex in other words. So if you look at 104 megabits per second, the Wi-Fi or the wireless actually had to do about 200 megabits per second because it's doing one direction at a time. Here we look a bit further away, we got an 81 according to the strict zero frame loss, but you can see it actually could have gone to 140, which is amazing type of rates. That would be 140 like a fiber specification, dual. You can go 140 up and down simultaneously. Here we were getting better as we were going further. That's 40 meters away, and here we were hitting 100 again according to the zero frame loss. But once again, getting to quite similar values if you look at it with a bit of frame loss. Here we're going to figures, in some cases 120 according to the zero frame loss standard. But strange enough, the actual sort of max still keeps on being in the range of 130 to 140 megabits per second. Once again, duplex. So about double that, 250 megabits per second in terms of normal Wi-Fi parlance. So here we were doing, for example, to the 80 meters away, or 180 meters away, sorry, we were doing 83 and 150, quite an amazing figure. And there's a bit of an anomaly of this zero frame loss, because if you look at again the actual max rate before it starts dropping off is 130. So it seems in all cases about 130 is in real life what you would get, but according to the strict standard, and that's a fiber type standard, in other words a fixed line type of standard, it would be rated at that. This was a nice test, a slightly different standard. This is ITU standard, and they've got VRV testers that actually implement these standards, and that was measured over a 24-hour period to really, this is how you would qualify a specific link, and they said this link could be stated to be in other words, a 100 megabits per second dual directional link or duplex link. Then you look at jitter, not jitter, latency. Okay, and latency, it looks quite high here, but if you go do the math, you'll see that we got an average of 3.2, minimum of 2.7. So clearly this was an outlier, or 2 or 3 outliers, because it was a large number of tests that were performed. And you can see that it would actually be specified as a 2.7 millisecond latency, clearly meeting, sorry, that was a bit fast, meeting the typical sort of 5G type of standards or fiber standards. I don't think any of us got much better latency than that. Of course, that's a pure RF latency, and you would add latency with the network. Okay, here we ran iPerf. iPerf is a sort of freeware piece of software where you can really overload a router. In this case, we use 5 CPEs, each of them having 5 streams, trying desperately to get it through. So you've got 25 users here trying to download, upload, and do what they like. And if you go look carefully at this, you can see that it's split very equally. That was amazing. We didn't run any specific sort of bandwidth management between users, but typically split it between users. But more importantly is that the total, in other words, the total still adds up to what we roughly get. In other words, it was splitting it nicely in the sense that there wasn't much loss because of the fact that you've got all these guys competing for access to the router. Interference testing, perhaps the most interesting part. We chose our weakest link, if you go look back at the slides, which was the 10-meter one, strangely enough. But it's also the worst one to do this test for, because what we did there, and you must remember that Jacob's not pointing to that guy, it's pointing sort of off-center. But right in the middle there, we tried laptops, we tried mobile phones, we tried actual routers. We held it right between, in other words, in line with the link. And we just couldn't measure any discernible effect. In other words, the interference, like we knew, but many people say interference, absolutely no discernible effect on the links. And that's due to the fact that we've got this massive signal to noise. Of course, also the standard that exists on the phones. We were at a fixed frequency, but could be avoiding it and so forth. But that's real life. Here we did a full internet sort of speed test. Okay. And this is obviously a test just to see whether we can go via Telegraph, the whole Facebook network, and down to some service somewhere, but really just do the complete test. And once again, this is now sort of call it typical speed test type of results, and you can see that we get our download speeds much higher than upload. Now, that's certainly not due to the FibrePoynt system, because if you go look at the FibrePoynt, we were getting it roughly equal both ways. So this must be some kind of asymmetry sitting along the rest of the network, typical network asymmetry. So I would say these are the actual relevant figures, and clearly we were getting excellent figures, or excellent type of figures when we do download, upload tests. And like I say, that asymmetry, not at all related. We in fact almost got the opposite in real life if you look at a very symmetrical type of links. So if we look at it in conclusion, we had phenomenal type of speeds. Okay, unidirectional actually quite a bit higher. These are the ones with 0 frame loss, as I pointed out. If you look at the sort of optimal, where it's a bit of frame loss, but the highest actual throughput after error correction, we were often hitting 120, 130 duplex, megabits per second duplex speeds. I think this demonstrates the real disruptive potential of this technology. I would like to thank all of the people at Facebook that helped with these tests, but I really I think we've now got some small trial networks working, and a really exceptional type of method of covering or providing internet to people, which are very reliable, call it fiber-like, even though it uses unlicensed bandwidth, with a real advantage that we've got bandwidth galore, whereas people really struggling to get bandwidth for 5G, etc. Thanks a lot.